Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. You know, we have two things that don't really go together, but yet you'll find them a lot with each other.
There's an intersection.
Exactly.
There. Yeah. We're glad to have you all with us. Thank you so much for being with us. A warm day here in Lexington, Kentucky.
Very warm. Hopefully it's going to get cooler.
Yeah, I think it's warm everywhere in the eastern U.S. at least right now. But I'm glad to have you all with us today. Things are really exciting here on campus at UK this week. We have started the fall semester, so we've got about 30,000 undergraduates running all over campus. So it's a lot of excitement and fun. But we're excited to have you all with us here today on From the Woods Today. And we've got two cool guests. One of them's a first timer.
I know, and you love first timers.
Well, because I just want to expand the audience and grow. Because there's so many amazing natural resource professionals here in the state that we're just kind of tapping into them a little bit. So it's really great to kind of bring them on and share them with the audience as well. But we're going to have Mr. James Cook. He is with Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Woods, because we're going to be talking about cooking.
Well, yeah, I know. I just said that before we started.
But he's a small games biologist with them, and he's going to be talking about kind of that, and we will talk a little bit about Cook Wild. And then we have back Dr. Tiffin, and she's going to be talking about kind of some of those critters that cause us some grief related to some of the animals and stuff.
Yeah, and how you can kind of hopefully get rid of some of those around your area. But
so we're excited to have both those with us, and we'll get started with those in just a minute. But what I would say, folks, if y'all have questions for our presenters today, please use the chat function. And if you're on YouTube or you're a podcast listener, we want to respond to you as well. So just hit us up via email at forestry.extension@uky.edu, and we can respond that way. Otherwise, chat function here for those on Zoom, and I'm excited about this show.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to have Hannah on first and talk about a little bit about how do you get rid of some of that things around your woods. So Hannah, if you don't mind coming on.
Definitely. Glad to be back.
To the show again. Love it. So you're going to be talking about mosquitoes and ticks and kind of how to get rid of those around your wooded areas and in your home.
Exactly.
Something we all need.
I know. You're going to be a person for sure with this. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you want to go ahead and get started, we'd appreciate it.
All right. Sounds good. Move things around here quick.
It always happens. Oh.
All right. Can you all see that all right?
Gotcha.
Perfect. Thanks. Your closed caption is still on.
If it matters.
Every time. All right. How's that?
Thank you.
Looks good.
All right. All right. Well, I'm glad to be back, and thank you for having me back on the show. It's great to be here. I'm Hannah Tiffin, as they said. I am an assistant extension professor here at University of Kentucky, very new to UK, but excited to be here and starting up the veterinary entomology and parasite ecology lab here at UK. So I'll have my contact information listed at the end, but I would be grateful to hear from Kentuckians on what parasites, ticks, mosquitoes, etc., diseases are of most importance to you, so I can kind of focus my lab around those things that matter most to Kentuckians. I am a veterinary medical entomologist, so I've studied a lot of different disease systems, everything from mange in bears and coyotes to bed bugs on chickens to ticks on a whole variety of things from mice, bears, deer, and people. So today I'm going to be focusing on the critters themselves, so focusing on ticks and mosquitoes of importance in Kentucky, as well as how to manage those around the home and the woodlot. So in the United States, we really are our most difficult creature to control here in the US are ticks. So even though mosquitoes are known as the world's most dangerous animal, worldwide, because they cause really a huge amount of disease and fatalities for mosquito-borne diseases. In the US, while we still have mosquito-borne diseases, and I'll touch on those briefly at the end of my talk, really the major disease vector, so the major live organism that causes disease are ticks here. So nearly 95% of all diseases that are transmitted by a vector are transmitted by ticks. And Lyme disease does account for the vast majority of that. Kind of, fortunately, we don't have a lot of Lyme disease in Kentucky. It's the highest cases of Lyme disease are in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic states, but we do have Lyme disease here. It is something to be aware of. We also have some other diseases that are transmitted by ticks here in Kentucky. So I'm not going to go into those specific diseases or the species of ticks that are most common in Kentucky. From the Woods Today, I did a segment on there 2 weeks ago, should be posted on their site at some point. And there's also where I talked about these tick species and what diseases they can transmit here in Kentucky. But we also have information available on University of Kentucky Extension, so you can go on the site and find more info on those ticks as well. So some of the most common ticks that you will find in Kentucky are the American dog ticks, shown at the bottom there, the Lone Star tick, and the black-legged tick. And this is just to show that these ticks can really vary in their size and their appearance. So they have different life stages that they go through, starting as eggs and then going to a larvae, which is shown on the right there, which are really, really tiny. One little kind of interesting fact about larvae is that they all have 6 legs, whereas every other life stages of tick has 8. So if you have a small tick on you and it has 8 legs, then you can be pretty sure it's probably a nymph. Versus if it has 6 legs, that's a larvae. So that's the first stage of ticks. So it goes from larvae, nymphs to adult. And some ticks can be really small, even when they're adults. So this is just showing a nice poppy seed bagel full of ticks. These are black-legged ticks. Again, fortunately, while we do have black-legged ticks here in Kentucky, they're not as much of a problem as they are in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. We just don't have as many of them here yet. And they're not transmitting the bacteria that causes Lyme disease we don't have as many cases of Lyme disease. So what makes ticks tick though? So knowing what ticks need to survive and thrive is really critical when you're trying to think of the best control mechanisms for a tick. So while there's many different species of ticks out there, there's only a few that are major species of concern for humans and animals, like especially domestic animals. And these different species can transmit different pathogens, but that's all because they require having a blood meal to go through those different life stages that I talked about. So you have the tick eggs, and then they they hatch into larvae, and they require a blood meal at that point. So they need to feed on a host, and then they can molt and turn into a nymph. They need another blood meal at this point, and then they find a new host, have their blood meal, molt, and turn into an adult. So they have these different blood meals throughout their life stages, and that's what allows them to complete their life stage. They also really require moisture. So all ticks don't have a lot of ability to regulate their water, so they could dry out really easily. So that's important when we're talking about tick control around your property, because since they could dry out really easily, having kind of, shorter lawns, things where ticks can't get that moisture, they don't have a moisture barrier, is a good way to control ticks around you and around your property. But how do ticks find us? So they have a variety of different strategies that they use to find hosts. I'll show a video in just a second, but some ticks use what's known as questing, where they put their little legs in the air and they kind of move them around to be able to sense where a host is in space so that they can climb up on that host. And what they're looking for is a bunch of different signatures, something like heat or carbon dioxide. And so once they can sense that, they can orient themselves to that host. So I'll show you here. I have a black-legged tick on my hand. She's just kind of crawling around, figuring her way out. I blow on her, so emitting carbon dioxide, and then you can see that she oriented towards me. So that's one major strategy. I will say some tick species do use a little bit of a different strategy where they hunt for their hosts. I talked about this a little bit in the segment on August 14th. I also have this little video that I showed at that time posted on my Facebook page. So if you go to the Veterinary Entomology Parasite Ecology Facebook page, you can find the tick racing video, and you can see just how fast Lone Star ticks are. And that's because they use a different strategy to find their hosts. They're not active questers. They're not waiting on stalks of vegetation for their host to pass by. They're out there actively seeking hosts.
Have you
Okay, so moving on, not playing the video today. And then we're going to talk about tick bite prevention and control strategies around your yard and on your property. So integrated vector management is something I really like to talk about when I'm talking about control strategies for vectors, whether that be ticks or mosquitoes or any other kind of vector you're trying to control in your property, like flies, especially on animal facilities. And the main point of integrated vector management is that we have all of these different tools and tactics available for managing pests and vectors. And it promotes using a whole variety of tools given the pest or vector that you're dealing with, your property type, and what you have available. But promoting that we try to use as many tactics at the base of this pyramid because they are the least toxic tactics. So cultural tactics include things like personal protection behavior, which I'll talk about in a minute, and behaviors that limit your contact with vectors or pests, so limiting your risk. And then we try to limit the amount of toxic management tactics that we use. So we try to use more prevention tactics and less control of the chemical controls and things that could be a little bit more toxic to our environment or ourselves. Not going to go into all of these today, but just to show that there are a whole variety of tactics available for tick control around your property. But really the primary thing that you should be focusing on first and foremost is cultural control. So that's personal protection. I talked about this August 14th as well. I'm just going to briefly talk about it again because it is so important. So changing your behaviors to minimize your risk of exposure to the bites. So wearing long pants, long sleeves, tucking your pants into your socks, essentially making it more difficult for ticks or mosquitoes to reach you, to bite you in the first place. Also limiting your time outdoors or in areas that are more tick risky. So areas with more brush where ticks may be present. Okay. But let's go into the specifics on managing your landscape and vegetation around your property or around your woodlot for limiting ticks. So first and foremost, reducing areas where ticks would survive and thrive. So this is areas where they can get that kind of moisture barrier. So thinking like a tick, you have to think of how to protect where best to get areas that have moisture available. So remember, ticks dry out really easily. So these are areas that you want to focus on, areas where ticks could survive with that available moisture. So what this means is focusing on areas of high use as well. So where you, your family, your pets may spend the most amount of time. Because I'm not saying, you might have a huge property. I'm not saying go across your entire property and mow everything down, get rid of all types of vegetation, because one, that's not feasible. And two, that would be highly expensive. But focusing on those areas where you spend the most amount of time with you, your family, your pets, and then trimming and managing vegetation, mowing the grass or adding mulch. So adding these like kind of drier barriers to minimize when ticks can pick up that water. Removing brush and leaf litter. A lot of tick species really thrive in leaf litter because, again, it can provide kind of a barrier from, hot sunlight, from too much moisture, from not enough moisture. So it provides kind of a safe region for them to exist. So removing that leaf litter in those areas where you spend a lot of time can really help with tick control as well. And also reducing contact between hosts and tick habitat. So hosts being animals like horses, like your dogs, pets, and also yourself. So people are hosts for ticks as well. So what that means is reducing an overlap in areas where you have tick habitat, so brushy areas, tall grasses, wild areas where ticks can survive, and where your animals will spend the most amount of time. And then also creating a barrier or buffers between the areas where you're spending more time and that tick habitat. So for instance, mowing areas on the edge of your property to make it a little bit drier. Adding mulch, adding dry pellets around your property to make it a little drier, a little more difficult for ticks to come into the areas where you're spending the most amount of time. I will say, you have to keep in mind that ticks don't just crawl around on their own all the time. They're often found on a host as well. So minimizing the amount of wildlife that's coming into your property is also pretty critical for minimizing ticks on your property. And I'll talk about that in just a minute as well. So that's what we call host targeted control tactics. So limiting the amount of other hosts that can come onto your property or limiting the ticks on those other hosts is one way to control ticks. So one of these methods that I really like to recommend is tick tubes. This is primarily for black-legged ticks and to interrupt the Lyme disease cycle, but it could be used for other tick species as well. There's just much more limited data for ticks and other disease systems. But essentially what this does is it uses the host behavior in order to kill the ticks. So immature life stages of ticks will often be found on small mammals like mice. And these mice are seeking out nice, comfy shelter. So if you've ever found a mouse nest, you've seen that it's this big, cushy nest. So they're out there, they're seeking materials for their nest. What we do here is we put out these cardboard tubes that have a precise amount of treatment in the cotton. So you can find these tubes at Home Depot, Lowe's, a bunch of different stores. But essentially the mice find these tubes in the environment, they see the cotton, they're like, yay, we found cotton for our nests. They bring it back to their nests, and they're not only treating themselves with the tick treatment, but they're also treating their nest. So any ticks that are on the mouse in the nest and on any other pups or other mice that are in that nest as well. So it kills ticks in the whole nest area, which is great. So that's limiting ticks on a major host. Another host-targeted tactic is to reduce wildlife coming into your property, or at least minimizing the amount of wildlife coming into the areas where you're spending the most amount of time. So again, not putting up fencing around your entire property, but maybe trying to limit wildlife in those areas where you're spending the most amount of time with you, your family, your pets, so that they are bringing in fewer ticks. This strategy has the data kind of goes back and forth on this. So it's not known how well this works in terms of disease reduction, but it should reduce the number of ticks by limiting more wildlife hosts. There's also chemical applications that are available for tick control and mosquito control. These range from biopesticides like a fungus that you can spray on your property to synthetic and non-synthetic chemicals. I'm not going to be talking about those today because those pretty much always require a pesticide applicator license, but those are available as well. Okay, and then really quickly into mosquito species and diseases that are present in Kentucky and in the US. So you've probably seen a bunch of these news stories about Triple E, or Eastern Equine Encephalitis, circulating in the news. This is a virus that's transmitted by mosquitoes. We do have it in the United States. It has been found in Kentucky. We don't have any fatalities. So it's rare in people to begin with. And so that's why it's been circulating in the news. There's no human cases that have been reported in Kentucky recently, but it really highlights the importance of vaccinating animals. So this disease, while rare in humans, it can circulate in mosquitoes and cause disease in horses. So in horses particularly, it can be fatal when the horses are unvaccinated. So we have had Triple E in horses in Kentucky, but the only fatalities that have arisen from that are in unvaccinated horses. So this is really, highlighting the importance of vaccinating and continuing to keep those vaccines up to date in your animals. So we talked about what ticks need to survive. On the kind of the flip side, what do mosquitoes need to survive? So they also need water. They need more of a body of water though. But this could be a very small body of water. They need it because they have an aquatic life stage. So you can see here at the bottom of the screen that mosquitoes, their life stages go from eggs that are laid in some sort of body of water, then they hatch and they become aquatic larvae. So that stage is always aquatic. And then they change life stages and become pupae and then eclose and become adults. So for mosquitoes, they need to have water. Their preference on whether that water is totally stagnant or standing still, or if it's slow moving really depends on the mosquito species though. They also need organic material. So this is to provide safety for the eggs, but also nutrition for those immature aquatic life stages. So it makes it, in some ways, easy to know what to do to control mosquitoes. You need to remove those water sources. So this is tipping out any standing water. You need to toss out any trash or debris, so sources that could hold water, and then treat any standing water that you can't remove. So things like bird baths or ornamental ponds, treating those with biological controls like fish that will eat mosquito larvae, or BTI, which is like a mosquito dunk, or chemicals. So treating those so that you have fewer mosquitoes in those areas. Just to, throw a little fear out there, some species of mosquitoes can hatch in less than a tablespoon of water, so things like a bottle cap. And so that's why the toss portion of this is really important. So removing any kind of debris or trash around your property can also reduce those instances of artificial container breeding mosquitoes. So those mosquito species that can breed in these really small bits of water. So I just have a few little examples here of where you might be able to find mosquitoes breeding on property. So things like bird baths. Again, I'm not saying remove all your bird baths on your property or anything of that sort. Just add some either aeration to get the water moving to make it, not a stagnant area for mosquitoes to lay their eggs, or adding things like mosquito dunks. That's one of the great control mechanisms out there, is to add mosquito dunks because the bacteria in there targets mosquito larvae, and it's fine for birds. And then also removing things like flower pots if they have standing water in them, and cleaning out eaves and gutters because it provides a nice kind of safe area for mosquitoes to lay their eggs and hatch and become those mosquito larvae. One more example, just highlighting different types of trash where mosquitoes could breed. So even things like plastic bags, because if it's out there and it can hold water, then you could have mosquitoes that are hatching from that. But what about things like fish ponds? So for fish ponds, what I want you to remember is that stagnant water, so water that's standing still, that's when you could be hosting a mosquito party. But if you have moving water, that's when you can have mosquito control. So moving water, especially if you're moving water from aeration plus predators, something like fish, then you could have a really good mosquito control system there, and you'll have very few mosquitoes that could survive in that kind of environment. So very quickly, the takeaway here is, for ticks, they need some sort of way to not dry out. So creating barriers between where you're spending the most amount of time and where ticks are more likely to be present, so those wild areas, and creating like a dry barrier in between, or having a dry, inhospitable environment where you're spending the most amount of time to reduce the number of ticks in that area. And for mosquitoes, remembering tip, toss, treat. So removing or adding ways to ensure that stagnant water does not become a source for mosquitoes on your property. And then last takeaway, good offense is your best defense. So wearing those protective layers, long sleeves, long pants, using things like permethrin or DEET as needed, and doing tick checks when you come in to make sure you don't have any ticks on you, using a shower to remove any ticks that may not be attached yet, throwing your clothes into a hot dryer. Again, that will kill ticks because they need that water moisture, and then adding screens on windows and doors to, again, add a barrier between you and mosquitoes. So all of these are tactics to add a barrier between you and getting bitten. Just a little plug to get ticks ID'd if you do live in Kentucky. So if you live in Kentucky and find a tick on yourself or your pets, they can be submitted to the entomology department. So just Google UKY tick surveillance and you'll be able to find instructions on how to submit those. And then I will, in the near future, have a submission portal for submitting ticks you find on livestock, wildlife, other animals, as well as any other ectoparasites, so fleas and keds. So go to tiffin-lab.com for more information. And at some point in the hopefully near future, a submission link will be coming available for that. I am, relatively new here at UK, so I would love to hear from you guys on what's important to you from a pest and parasite perspective. So if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at hannah.tiffin@uky.edu, go to my lab website, which also has a contact page, or go to the Veep Lab site on Facebook. All right, and that's it from me.
Yay! Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Two things that give us a lot of grief, right? Yeah, ticks and mosquitoes for sure.
Yeah, especially when you're in forestry.
Oh yeah, when you're out there exactly all the time.
Yes. So we did have a question come in, and what was your thoughts about the Thermacell, a mosquito portable repeller?
And before you answer, please, full disclosure, we both bought one of those. So let us know if it's okay. Yeah, we've already bought one at the house. My son's bought one too. So yeah. So all right, tell us the story.
So Thermacell is actually the company I work with for tick control. So they have a lot of science behind a lot of their products. So I really think they're a great company. I haven't worked with them on mosquito control, and I'm not sure what the portable repeller uses. I'd have to look at what that is. But generally with mosquitoes, there's things out there that, emit a frequency or have a small scent or things like that. They may be able to be useful in the future, but just where we're at with the technology isn't super useful right now. They're just not specific enough most of the time. If it's a repellent, then it probably does work. I'm just not sure what they use. I'll have to look at them.
Yeah, the ones we have is just like a little, basically repellent on a sheet, and you stick it over, and it's got like a little pilot light that heats it up underneath it, with a little butane tank in it, and it kind of heats it up, and it kind of comes into the air, basically. So there's got to be some repellent, I would think, on the
something. Yeah, I do know that we used to get bothered by ticks, and since we bought that, we don't, or mosquitoes, I'm sorry, not ticks. Since then we haven't. So I don't know if something has, nothing has changed in our surroundings.
So maybe because testimonial.
Right. So if there's a mosquito within a 50-mile radius, they're gonna find me. That's just how it is. And so that's why I was like, I have to get something, So
some people are just more attracted to mosquitoes.
Yeah, so, and my daughter has really bad mosquito, like she swells up like huge with one bite. Yeah, so I was like, well, let's try it.
I was a little sad to hear you talk about that triple E there, because I did see like yesterday on the news, and then I knew you were coming on today. I was like, oh man, and we've got a couple of horses here in Kentucky too. Yeah, so
just a few.
Yeah.
Fortunately with triple E, there's a vaccination for horses, and it is more of a concern with horses than with people for the most part. So that's why the importance of vaccinating the animals and keeping up with those vaccines.
There was another question about prescribed burn, how it might kind of play in tick control, I
think James is going to talk about that
a little
later.
Bit. Okay, that's fine.
I'm not sure if he was talking about it or if he was just asking me about it.
Go ahead and
Yeah, if you've got thoughts on it, please.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I was talking, James was asking about this earlier, and was talking about prescribed burning as a part of tick control plans. So I didn't talk about that today just because generally, for a couple of reasons. One reason is that this would have to be done on a larger scale. And so I was thinking in terms of smaller homeowner, smaller woodlot properties. Regular homeowner's not going to use prescribed burning, obviously, but it does have a place in larger properties, and there's been some really interesting results that have come out looking at reduced tick burdens on properties that have had these prescribed burns. But it's just so early in that research that we don't really have a really good amount of wealth of information on that just yet. But I know that the Department of Kentucky Wildlife here is looking into doing some research on that. So hopefully we'll have some more information on that soon.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I mean, you would think there'd be some change, right? Because at least initially with them changing the habitat, at least, right? You know, where they kind of perch and are ready to kind of get on you.
And snatch you up. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, because they need that, water too. So it just wouldn't be very hospitable to a tick.
Right. But for how long and how effective?
Exactly. Because then you have, these mice and other animals that come into the prescribed fire areas, and they could be bringing ticks in.
Yeah, the answer is it depends, right? So
yeah, unfortunately, just with everything, it depends.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, let's see. Was there other questions?
Yeah, this one.
Talking about the cedar side again, I think this was kind of a revision of a question we had previously. Can this be effective to spread about our yard and in plant beds without hurting the plants? So cedar side, again, not one I'm familiar with, and I don't know.
Yeah, and I looked at the website for that, and I still not entirely sure what they're using for that, but it could be useful in terms of just creating like that dry barrier that I was talking about. So I have no idea if it'll hurt your plants or not. That I cannot speak to. I am not a botanist. Any plant I bring into my house dies. But it's it's potentially worth trying out. I don't know that you would really need to worry about ticks in your plants to begin with, though. But creating mulch barriers around the areas where you're spending time can help reduce ticks on your property. So the cedar side looked like it was kind of a drier mulch.
Okay.
So that could be effective in that way.
Wonder if it's just like cedar shavings or something. I don't know. I'm not even seeing it before.
Right. Yeah, I think it was some sort of cedar shavings.
Yeah.
I had a couple other kind of nice comments about the Thermacell stuff.
Right.
So that's good.
All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you for being on.
Yes, thanks again, Dr. Tiffin. So glad to have you here in Kentucky. I'll encourage our viewers to take you up on your offer again, because we do have a lot of folks that are, traditional ag producers as well, and certainly got county agents on here as well. So if y'all see any kind of parasites on those animals,
right,
assume they will be able to go to you in lab. Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, you come back anytime you got something you want to share with the state, and try to help you get it out.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sounds great. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Looking forward to James' presentation next.
Yes, me too. And it is James Woods, not James Cook.
Right. All right.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of James.
Yeah. And I have to apologize to James for getting his name mixed up.
We had just talked about Cook Wild. Yes, exactly. So that was the problem. So James, if you want to turn your
you can turn on your camera and I can apologize to your face.
Hey, all right, I'm here. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, sir. I did not mean to call you Mr. Cook.
No worries at all.
Yeah, I'm excited about cooking. So
it's
lunchtime. So.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, small game hunting, cooking. What's not to be excited about?
Good.
Exactly.
Well, welcome. First time on the show. We're delighted to have you with us. We certainly appreciate you and all the fine folks at the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. We've had a number of, your counterparts on over the years, and we're excited to have you here talking about something that's kind of pretty cool. And I think certainly important to a lot of our landowners here in the state as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing.
Yeah. So, we were talking right before the show that, some people may not know what you do. So why don't you kind of, before you start your presentation, tell us a little bit about what your job responsibilities are?
Sure, absolutely. So I work with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife as a small game biologist. And so basically what that means is I'm responsible, along with my supervisor, the small game coordinator, to monitor and keep up with populations of squirrels, rabbits, and quail across the state of Kentucky. And so we spend a lot of our time doing surveys and monitoring and research on those species. And then we also do a lot of outreach, promoting good habitat management practices that would maintain those populations on the landscape. So when you're thinking about squirrels, for instance, you might think, well, those populations are doing really well. So, what do we have to worry about?
Right.
Well, yeah,
Mine too.
around mine too, for sure. But when it comes to something like quail, for instance, those populations are not doing great at all. So, that's a big part of my position, is reaching out to people and letting them know what they could do on their property, and making sure that, people are doing good land management practices that promote habitat for those species.
Okay.
That's awesome. That is right in line with what we try to do on this show, right?
Exactly.
We try to connect landowners and those that work with landowners with those professionals and those programs to kind of help them be good stewards of their property. So, Mr. Woods, we're really glad to have you today.
Appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Yeah, for sure.
So if you want to go ahead and start your presentation.
Pull it up here.
All right. Getting there.
Right. There we go.
Perfect.
How does that look?
Looks good.
Excellent. Well, so oops, I'm going to go back. All right, there we go. So I'm excited to be talking about small game hunting specifically, and that's going to be the subject matter of this talk. And my hope is that I'll be able to give you some information about small game hunting, what that means, what small game are, and then kind of give you perhaps a new perspective on what that looks like and why people might hunt small game in the first place. So when I say small game, what I'm referring to, the quintessential small game would be squirrels, rabbits, and quail. And for me, I'm a small game biologist for the state, as I've just said, and those are the species that I'm primarily responsible for monitoring across the state. But from a hunting perspective, many people, I think, might group in species like frogs, doves, and even waterfowl into the small game category from a hunting perspective, simply because the way that you hunt small game species with their bag limits and the increased population sizes for a lot of small game species compared to big game, you might group all those together when you're thinking about hunting. So what are the big differences then between small game and big game, and what exactly are we talking about there? So if we think about species like turkeys and deer and elk, those are our big game species in Kentucky. And if you're going to hunt turkeys, you can harvest 2 turkeys in the spring. You can harvest 1 buck in Kentucky and various numbers of does, depending on which county you're in. And if you're lucky to get drawn in our lottery system, you might be able to harvest 1 elk. So you can harvest a limited number of those animals. But in contrast, you have small game species like squirrels, where you can harvest 6 squirrels per day of the entire small game season, entire squirrel season. So it creates a little bit of a different mindset when you go out for a small game hunt. Your probability of encountering that animal and successfully harvesting at least 1 is a little bit higher for many people than maybe your big game animals. So the way you approach it can be a little bit different. There's also, cost and time commitments associated between big game and small game hunting that make those 2 types of hunting just a little bit different. So let's look at that for a second. So if you look at this hunter here, she has a tree stand, a bow, a backpack, camouflage, safety harness, binoculars. So this is the type of setup that you might have if you're going to go be pursuing a deer for a deer hunt. And that's, can be cost prohibitive for some people. That's quite a bit of gear. Now, you can do it more cheaply than this, but it's still a fair bit of expense. If you put that in contrast with, say, a squirrel hunt, you might just need a rimfire rifle and some camouflage, and that'll get you out the door and get you out squirrel hunting. And if you really want to go cheap, you can just use a slingshot. With manufactured ammunition and a hunting slingshot, you can go squirrel hunting with just a slingshot for very low expense. So when you're thinking about a lot of the forested sections of Kentucky, almost all of those areas have squirrels and opportunities to hunt there with minimal equipment. And then there's the time commitment part of it. So if I harvest a deer, if I'm thinking of going deer hunting, I might need to set aside a whole weekend, because if I hunt, one day and harvest an animal, I'm going to need the next few days to process that animal and get it in the freezer. If I want to go for a squirrel hunt, though, I can slip away on a Saturday afternoon and hunt for a few hours. And if I do harvest a squirrel, it doesn't take me any time at all to get that animal put in the freezer. So there's a time that, the time difference is quite a bit different. And to exemplify that, so this is a photo from our Thanksgiving dinner this past year. We sat down there, had a meal, had some small game as a part of that, or I think it was venison on this particular day. But it's become a tradition for us is we'll finish up eating and hanging out with the family, and then we'll put our boots on and we'll tromp around in the woods a little bit and try to find a rabbit or a squirrel. And that's, it doesn't take any time at all. And it's kind of a fun tradition that we've kept up now for several years. And I think one of the really the best things about small game hunting is that oftentimes you can do it with a dog. I have, this is my dog when she was a puppy, Hazel. And it's really cool to be able to be out there and observe your dog working and finding game, and in my case, pointing it. If you have beagles and you're rabbit hunting, they'll be tracking the animals. And so small game and dogs have kind of gone hand in hand for a long time. And I actually recently had the opportunity to attend a meeting with some wildlife professionals focused on conservation of bobwhite quail. And at that meeting, we had a conversation about what all of our favorite thing was about hunting quail. And for almost everybody there, it was the ability to watch their dog work. I mean, one of the people's favorite thing about quail hunting was watching that dog work and point quail and find them. And I thought that was fascinating, because these are people that have kind of devoted their lives to working with quail specifically. And yet their favorite thing about that is their ability to be there with their dog and just have that companionship and watch that dog work, which is pretty neat. So I had to throw in a couple more pictures of my dog. Here she is putting a little show on with a point as a puppy. And then here she is all grown up. I was hunting there for grouse. And here's an old photo I found. Some guys in the early days of quail hunting in the United States, and they've got their dogs with them from the very beginning. And that's the case with quail hunting. It's the case with squirrels and rabbits as well. There's dogs that have been around sort of right beside people that whole time hunting for those species, which I think is pretty fascinating and pretty neat. So what about the food value of small game? Well, I'm not a great cook myself, but I do enjoy eating small game. There's so much variety out there, and it's neat to be able to experiment and try different types of food. I find it really fascinating, and I rely on books like these to help me, prepare that in the best way I can. There's also some great recipes on the internet that can help you in that journey as well. I have had some feedback from people when I'm talking about hunting and talking about hunting small game specifically. And for people who don't have experience hunting, they look at something like a deer and they think, well, if I was going to hunt, I would hunt a deer because it seems like you get a lot of meat, for each harvest, and you could go out and hunt a little bit and get some meat and put it in the freezer and then be done. Whereas if you hunt a squirrel, you just get a little bit of meat for your effort, right? And so for some people, that seems like maybe it wouldn't be worth your time. So the way I try to explain this is, if you think about going out to a nice steak dinner, you're going out there, obviously you're there for the steak, but also you're there because your friends are there and you're having a nice evening, and you're getting the full experience of going out to dinner, and you're paying a premium for that steak to do that. And so it's those collection of all the components of going out to dinner that makes that experience worthwhile. And if you think about small game hunting, and I think hunting in general, if a big part of it is the camaraderie that you have with your friends and family, going out hunting. This is my dad and my brother-in-law and myself all grouse hunting here. And it's that camaraderie, it's the chance to see nature and experience it in a new way. It's the chance to, watch your dog work and, increase that bond as you hunt longer with your dog. And then finally, it's culmination in a great meal at the end of the full thing. So I say that to say that, yeah, you don't get a whole lot of food every time you go out, and you might go squirrel hunting or quail hunting or something like that. But what you do gain is this collection of memories and experiences, and then a meal at the end. So it's the full package that makes small game hunting really cool, I think. So what's holding you back? Is it lack of experience? You don't have the experience with firearms or the equipment associated with hunting that's keeping you from jumping in there and trying out some small game hunting? Is it the expense potentially? Probably not when it comes to small game hunting, because like I've just said, you can get into this pretty inexpensively. And then it could be a place to go. For many people, they just don't feel like they have enough property to be able to hunt where they're at. But it doesn't take a whole lot of property to hunt small game, especially if you're thinking about something like squirrels. In Kentucky, we actually have a lot of public land, and it's distributed across the state pretty well. So all the green stars here are wildlife management areas, and you can see that you can live pretty well anywhere in Kentucky and find a place to go that is a wildlife management area. And those areas outlined in yellow there, those are public hunting areas that aren't wildlife management areas, but they're still open to hunting, and you could go out there and hunt for small game on any of them. And I will say a lot of these get used pretty heavily for deer and turkey hunting, but for small game hunting, squirrels, rabbits, that sort of thing, very few people are utilizing them. And it's a really great place to just go enjoy the outdoors and maybe bring home some food in the process. And when it comes to, not knowing what you're doing, that lack of experience component, we actually have programs like Field to Fork with Fish and Wildlife, and there's ample, content on the internet that you can learn this stuff and, get in there and learn how to hunt small game. So I'd really encourage you all to try that and get out there and experience what small game hunting is all about. And that's all I have for you today, but I appreciate your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent.
Awesome presentation. Thank you.
Get you fired up. Like, let's go.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. You're a good
Fantastic.
motivator.
Yes, exactly. We did have a question that somebody was wanting to know, is there any diseases with eating wild rabbit due to diseases and parasites or issues?
Yeah,
Sorry.
so yeah, for sure. There's you want to wear gloves. The one that immediately comes to mind is tularemia, is a disease you can get from wild rabbits. And if it's cooked, it's nothing to worry about. But if it's not cooked, and if you have a little cut on your hand, then it is a disease that you definitely don't want to get. And so that's the main one that I'm thinking of. Hannah may be able to jump in there and actually add some more to that list. But tularemia is the one I think about. You always want to wear gloves and protect yourself. And truthfully, that's true for domestic rabbits too. You have some control over the exposures with the domestic rabbits, but you're never, completely safe when you're handling raw meat. So you want to, wear gloves.
Good point. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I know certainly we have a lot of landowners that that have a lot of this small game, but
Right.
like you were saying, may not be taking advantage of it, right?
Yeah.
And I really love the story, your Thanksgiving story. I mean,
Mhm.
those traditions
Yeah.
and bringing the family together. And it's another way to connect people to the land, right?
Mhm.
And to that resource. So certainly appreciate your presentation, and kind of the work that you're doing is really important here in the state too. So thank you all in the small games department over there for what you do.
Mhm. Yeah, we definitely appreciate it. And I was right before the show, I was talking to Dr. Matt Springer, who is our wildlife specialist, and he was talking about the different recipes that are on Cook Wild, which is where you got the Cook Wild thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go ahead and share that in the chat pod. So they
Fantastic.
have like this whole like a rabbit
Yeah.
and like stews and all these kind of different things that you
Wow.
could do for game. So there's a whole bunch of recipes on there. So if anybody, was like, well, I have no idea, what I could even try, then that website right there, she can tell you some.
And I was going to say, I know some of our county extension offices, they also host these kind of Cook Wild things where they
Right.
kind of, help people learn how to hunt, and then they kind of help them be able to process as well. So, yeah, it's a neat little partnership there
It is.
for sure.
And I know we've had,
Fantastic.
some presentations on here before of, cooking venison and that kind of thing as well. So it's, it's just an interesting kind of thing to think about, to be able to do, maybe have your family have enjoyment and then actually, come back and cook it all together.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff, James.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah, absolutely.
so come back to us whenever you got stuff for people that care about their land, woodland owners, and the natural resource professionals. That's really the target audience for this program. So anytime you got something that we can help them, enlighten them, or help connect them to a program or something's going on, think of us, and we'll try to help you get the word out.
Will
Definitely.
do. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right.
Thank
you, James. Appreciate you, sir. Good stuff.
Good
man.
stuff. Yeah, like I said, two different topics, but they definitely intersected.
Yes, a big thanks to Dr. Tiffin. It's great to have her here at UK now.
Exactly.
So we'll remind folks that if you do see some ticks or some other things out there, whether it be on dogs or horses or cats, there's places that will accept those and try to understand what's going on with those a little bit. So you can check that out. Also, go back and check her segment out from a couple weeks ago. That's already posted online, and real good to have Mr. Woods on from Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, learning about the small game program there. So good to be with you as well. Glad to have you all with us, and we hope you all join us every Wednesday.
Yeah, definitely. You can go to FromTheWoodsToday.com and see all of the shows we've ever done. So there's a lot on there. So, you can binge watch us for days.
Yeah, but if there's something you want to see and you haven't seen, there's probably a good chance others here in the state want to see it too. So let us know, and we'll try to identify a presenter that can kind of cover that subject matter.
Definitely. Until then, we will see you next week. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
From the woods today. From the woods today.